The meeting lasted 4 minutes. Adam Cole had driven 40 minutes to get there. Parked in a visitor space at a building that cost more per square foot than most people's annual salaries, and waited in a lobby with a marble floor and a receptionist who had looked at him with the specific naturality of someone trained to make certain kinds of people feel that they are in the wrong place. He had come to say one thing to one person. The person he was there to see was a man named Victor Hargrove, 47 years old, founder of Hargrove Group, worth what the financial press had recently estimated at $240 million. A man whose face appeared on regional business magazines and whose name was on a building at a local university. Victor had seen Adam's wife for the past 9 months. Adam had found out 6 days ago. He had not come to fight. He had not come to threaten. He had come because he needed to look at the man in person, because something in him could not move forward without having done that. Victor had agreed to 4 minutes as if he were fitting a parking ticket into his schedule. He had said what he wanted to say. He had said it with the ease of someone who had never been seriously questioned about anything in his professional or personal life. Then he had said the word, pathetic. Adam had stood there for a moment. Then he had walked out. He had driven home. He had sat in the kitchen of the house he shared with a woman he now understood differently. And then, very quietly, he had started to think. What Victor Hargrove did not know, what no one in that building knew, was what Adam Cole did when he went home and started thinking, and what he was about to do with it. Like this video right now, those likes are what gets stories like this in front of the people who need them. Hit it. Subscribe too. It's free. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Now let me take you back 6 months before Adam ever walked into that lobby. Adam Cole was 36 years old and had been writing code since he was 13. Not as a hobby, as a language. The way certain people find, early, the one mode through which the world makes complete sense, and spend the rest of their lives using it to solve problems other people can't see clearly enough to solve. He had a master's in computer science from a state university that he had attended on a full scholarship. He had spent his 20s in a series of positions at companies that appreciated what he could do without fully comprehending how unusual it was. He was quiet in meetings. He did not lobby for visibility. He documented everything, worked methodically, and produced results that showed up in the systems he built rather than in the conversations he had. He was not, by the metrics his industry typically used to measure importance, impressive on the surface. He lived in a modest house on the east side of the city. He drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic. He wore plain clothes and had no social media presence, and went to a diner near his house for lunch on Wednesdays because he liked the soup. His wife, Megan, had married him at 28, when both of them were in an earlier version of their lives, and the gap between his world and the world she eventually wanted had not yet become visible. Megan was 34, and had spent the past 4 years becoming someone whose ambitions had outgrown the house on the east side, and the Honda Civic, and the soup at the Wednesday diner. She was not wrong to want more. People are allowed to want more. But the way she had moved toward more was a choice she had made and would need to reckon with. She had met Victor at a networking event 18 months ago. Victor Hargrove was everything that made a certain kind of impression: the suit, the car, the specific confidence of a man who had never needed to develop patience because everything he had wanted had eventually arrived without it. He was charming in the way that powerful men can be charming when they decide someone is worth charming, and Megan had found the experience of being decided upon by someone like that more compelling than she had been prepared for. The affair had run for 9 months before Adam found out. He found out the way people find things out, not through drama, through an ordinary moment. A name that appeared too many times in too similar a context. A phone left in the wrong room for a few minutes. The specific accumulating weight of small consistencies that resolve, when you finally look directly at them, into a single, undeniable shape. He had not confronted Megan immediately. He had spent 2 days thinking. Then he had arranged the meeting. 7 years ago, Adam had done the most significant work of his professional life. He had been brought in as a contract software engineer by a cybersecurity firm called Citadel Systems. engaged to build a proprietary access control architecture for their enterprise clients. The architecture was complex, a layered authentication system with specific encryption protocols that Adam had developed largely from first principles, building on academic research that he had been following for 3 years. The work had taken 8 months. He had billed for it. He had signed a contract that covered his deliverables and his compensation, and that contained intellectual property language that his attorney had reviewed, and that at the time he had accepted as standard. The system he built went to production for Citadel's clients. Citadel had subsequently been acquired. The acquiring company was Hargrove Group. Adam had known this. He had read about the acquisition in a tech publication 2 years later. He had noted it. He had considered whether the IP terms of his original contract covered the transfer, and had decided, in the way that people who are good at their work and not good at self-advocacy decide these things, that it probably wasn't worth pursuing. He had filed this information and moved on. What he had not known until 6 days ago, until the night he sat in the kitchen, understanding that his marriage was over, was a detail he had not previously had reason to investigate. The security architecture he had built for Citadel Systems was not, as he had assumed, one component among many in Hargrove Group's technology stack. It was the foundation. After the acquisition, Hargrove Group had built its entire enterprise security division on top of Adam's architecture, not adapted, not evolved. The original system, running at the core of everything, with subsequent layers built on top of it. The contract language he had signed at Citadel had transferred first-party IP rights to Citadel for the deliverables he had produced, but it had not explicitly addressed sub-licensing in the event of acquisition. Adam had found this out because in the 2 days between discovering the affair and arranging the meeting with Victor, he had done what he always did when he needed to understand something. He had gone to the documents. He had pulled his original Citadel contract. He had requested, through a professional contact, access to the Hargrove Group acquisition documentation that had been filed with the relevant regulatory bodies. He had read both with the specific patience of someone who had written contracts and knew what the language meant. He had called an IP attorney. The attorney had said, "Can you send me what you have?" He had sent it. The attorney had come back in 24 hours. "The sub-licensing in the Hargrove acquisition is questionable at minimum," she had said. "If Hargrove Group is using the core architecture the way you're describing, this is worth examining seriously." Adam had thanked her. He had driven to Victor's building. He had sat in the lobby with the marble floor. He had heard the word. He had walked out. He had gone home, and he had called his attorney and said, "I want to proceed." But here is where the story becomes something more than a legal dispute, because Adam was not simply a contract engineer who had been inadequately compensated for work he had done 7 years ago. He was the person who had built the system. He knew it the way you know something you have created from the inside, not just how it functioned, but why it functioned. The specific architectural decisions he had made, the dependencies he had introduced, the maintenance requirements he had documented, and which had been followed by Hargrove's technical team for 7 years without fully understanding why they were necessary. One of those maintenance requirements was a licensing validation protocol that Adam had built into the architecture at a level below the visible system, not as a sabotage mechanism, as a routine authentication checkpoint designed to verify that the system was being used in licensed conditions. The protocol had a master credential that had never been transferred in the Citadel acquisition documentation, because nobody at Citadel had known to transfer it, because the person who had built it hadn't told them about it. Not deliberately. The documentation had been thorough, but this was a deep layer element that Citadel's technical team had not surfaced in the acquisition handover, and Hargrove's technical team had not found in 7 years of running the system. It was there. Adam knew it was there, and he knew what would happen if the validation protocol's licensing refresh, which ran on a specific annual cycle, received a non-renewal signal. The system would not crash. It would not delete data. It would not do anything dramatic. It would simply lock. Every enterprise client of Hargrove Group's security division, which now numbered 214 active accounts would experience access control failures simultaneously. Adam had never done anything with this knowledge until now. Like this video right now, we are at the part where everything is about to happen, and that like button needs to be hit before we go further. Do it. Subscribe if you haven't. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now? Now watch what Adam decides. Adam's IP attorney, whose name was Patricia Blake, had 20 years in technology intellectual property and the specific quality of someone who did not get excited by things until she had a clear reason to. She had a clear reason. The core question, she told Adam in her office 2 days after the meeting with Victor, is whether the Citadel acquisition documentation conveyed the full scope of rights needed to operate your architecture in the way Hargrove has been operating it. My read, based on what you've sent me, is that it did not. What does that mean practically? Adam said. It means Hargrove Group has been operating a system for 7 years that they may not have had full legal rights to operate in the way they've been operating it. It means there is a reasonable claim for licensing damages going back to the acquisition date. She looked at him. It also means you have a legitimate right to issue a cease and desist in relation to ongoing use, pending resolution of the rights question. Adam was quiet for a moment. What happens to their clients if the system goes down? He said. Patricia looked at him. That's a different question, she said. I know, he said. I'm asking it anyway. She thought about it. If Hargrove's Enterprise Security Division experiences a system outage, she said carefully, their clients, all of them, would experience simultaneous access control failures. Their systems would be locked. They would need to revert to backup protocols, which most of them may not have current. It would be significant disruption. How significant? For a healthcare client. Major. For a financial services client. Potentially catastrophic in the short term. She paused. Adam, I want to be clear that I'm advising you on your legal rights here. What you do with the technical capabilities you have is a separate question that I'm not in a position to advise on. Adam nodded. He sat with that distinction for several days. He was not a person who made decisions in anger. He was a person who made decisions after he had understood all the dimensions of a situation, which sometimes looked like patience and sometimes looked like something else. He thought about the word pathetic. He thought about the 214 enterprise clients. He thought about what a system outage would mean for the healthcare providers and financial services firms among them. He thought about workers and patients and account holders who had nothing to do with Victor Hargrove's choices or his own. He was not going to do that to them. That was clear. That had never actually been a genuine option, though he had let himself sit in the vicinity of the idea long enough to understand it fully. What he was going to do was the legal process. All of it. Completely. With documentation so thorough that when the case was resolved, the resolution would be real. He called Patricia. File the cease and desist, he said, and let's start building the damages claim. The cease and desist arrived at Hargrove Group's legal department on a Tuesday morning. Victor's general counsel, a careful man named Ethan, who had been at the company for 11 years, read it twice and went directly to Victor's office. Victor read it. He said, "Who is Adam Cole?" Ethan told him what the document said. Victor looked at the name. For the first time in a long time, Victor Hargrove felt the specific, disorienting sensation of someone who has been standing on ground he thought was solid and is now looking at the possibility that it wasn't. "Can we fight it?" he said. Ethan had been an attorney for 22 years. "The IP question is not clean," he said carefully. "The Citadel acquisition documentation has gaps. I need to bring in outside IP counsel, but my initial read is that we have exposure." "How much exposure?" Ethan said the number. Victor was quiet. "There's a validation protocol in the system," Ethan continued. "Our technical team has found it. They believe it's dormant, but the man who built it would be able to activate it. If the cease and desist is not resolved, and he moves for injunctive relief, a court could order the system suspended pending litigation." Victor said, "That would shut down every client we have." "Yes," Ethan said. Victor sat back. He thought about the 4 minutes, the lobby, the man in the plain clothes who had come to tell him something he hadn't particularly listened to and who he had sent away with one word. He said, "Find him." "I want to talk to him." Adam agreed to the meeting, not because Victor asked, because Patricia advised that a direct settlement conversation, documented and conducted properly, could produce a faster and more comprehensive outcome than protracted litigation. They met in a conference room with attorneys on both sides. Victor had brought his general counsel and 2 outside IP specialists. Adam had brought Patricia and a technical expert who could speak to the architecture's development history. Victor sat across from the man he had called pathetic in his own lobby 1 month earlier. He looked different in this room. Not smaller exactly, but differently sized, as if the scale of things had been recalibrated and his position within it had shifted accordingly. He said, "I owe you an apology for how I spoke to you," Adam said. "Yes." Victor waited for more. Well, there wasn't more. Patricia moved the conversation to the legal matter. The settlement negotiation took 4 days. It was not quick. It was not comfortable. Victor's team pushed back on the damages calculation repeatedly. Patricia held the line repeatedly. The technical expert presented documentation of the architecture's foundational role in Hargrove Group's security division that was, in the technical estimation of everyone in the room, unambiguous. On the 4th day, Victor's counsel made a number. Patricia looked at Adam. Adam looked at the number. He said, "We accept." The number was not public. What was public? Because the settlement terms included a licensing announcement that Victor's team had tried to avoid and Adam's team had insisted upon, was that Hargrove Group had entered a licensing agreement with Adam Cole for the intellectual property underlying their enterprise security architecture. The announcement ran in the same publication that had previously covered Hargrove Group's acquisition of Citadel Systems. People in the industry read it and understood what it meant. 3 things happened in the months after the settlement. The first was that Hargrove Group's enterprise security division, now operating under a formal licensing agreement, found that the license terms included audit rights that Adam's team began exercising. The audits revealed additional scope issues with how the architecture had been deployed for clients. Further remediation was required. The costs were significant. The second was that the financial press, which had been covering Hargrove Group favorably for years, began publishing a different kind of story, not about the settlement specifically that had been managed through careful PR, about Hargrove Group's exposure, the licensing costs, the audit requirements, the questions about what else in their technology stack might have similar foundational issues. Investors read these stories. Investment positions were adjusted. The third thing was that Megan had left Victor, not immediately. She had stayed through the initial settlement announcement, through the first quarter of declining press, through the first dinner party where people had looked at Victor differently, and she had felt it from the adjacent seat. She left when the financial reality became specific, not the $240 million. That was still there, mostly, but the lifestyle, the particular level of the lifestyle that had been the point, had been contracted by the litigation costs and the licensing fees and the ongoing audit exposure in a way that was felt in the texture of daily life before it showed up in any public number. She left. She called Adam once from a number he didn't recognize 6 months after the divorce had been finalized. He looked at the incoming call for a moment. He let it go to voicemail. He did not listen to the voicemail. He deleted it. Adam had started the company 3 months after the settlement, not as a reaction to Victor, not as a statement to Megan, as the thing he should have started 5 years earlier if he had not been good at his work and bad at advocating for the value of it. Cole Security Systems launched with the settlement capital, the documentation of the core architecture, and Adam's technical reputation, which, once the licensing story had circulated in the industry, was suddenly visible to people who had not previously known his name. His first hire was a sales lead named Marcus, who had 10 years of enterprise technology sales, and who, when Adam explained what he had built and why it was different, said, "How have I not heard of you before now?" "I wasn't looking to be heard," Adam said. "We're going to fix that," Marcus said. They did. By month 8, Cole Security Systems had 12 clients, and a Series A conversation underway with a technology-focused venture fund whose partners had read the same industry press that Victor's investors had read and arrived at the opposite conclusion about its implications. Victor Hargrove's name appeared in the story of Adam Cole's company only once, in a profile that a technology journalist wrote 14 months after the lobby meeting, which asked Adam where the company had started. Adam had said without particular emphasis, "Someone called me pathetic. I went home and started thinking." The journalist had asked if he wanted to elaborate. Adam had said, "Not really. The company is the elaboration." Cole Security Systems achieved its first $1 million month in revenue in month 14. The growth curve after that followed the pattern of a company whose product was genuinely differentiated in a market that had room for differentiation, not explosive, not dramatic, but consistent in the way that things built on real foundations tend to be consistent. Adam did not buy a larger house. He drove a different car, not a statement car, a practical one, newer than the Civic, because the Civic had earned its retirement. He moved the company's office from the shared workspace where it had started into a proper building at 18 months, which required a lease commitment that Marcus had advised on, and which Adam had signed with the specific calm of someone who understood exactly what the commitment rested on. On the day they moved in, Adam carried one thing from the shared workspace himself: a printed copy of the original Citadel contract, not as a grievance, as a document. He framed it and put it on the wall of his office, not prominently, in a corner where he could see it from his desk. People who came into the office occasionally asked what it was. He told them it was the first contract he had ever signed without fully reading the IP language. "What happened?" they asked. "I learned to read the IP language," he said. Adam Cole walked out of Victor Hargrove's lobby and did not fight, did not shout, did not do anything that the moment seemed to call for. He went home and started thinking, and the thinking produced something that a fight in a lobby never could have. Victor had called him pathetic. What Victor had actually called him was dangerous, without knowing it, without having looked closely enough to understand what was in front of him, and that the failure to look closely was the most expensive mistake Victor made, not the affair, not the word. The failure to understand that the quiet man in the plain clothes who had driven 40 minutes and waited in the marble lobby was the person who had built the foundation his empire was standing on. Here's the question: was what Adam did justice or revenge? He used a legal process completely legitimately, but he started it because of a personal wound. Does the motivation change how you see the outcome? And more honestly, if you had been in that lobby, what would you have done? Drop your answer in the comments. I want the real one. And tell me where in the world you're watching from. Like this video. If Adam's story did something for you today, that like button costs nothing, and it matters, and you know it. Hit it. Share this with someone who needs it. Subscribe if you're not already. The next story is coming and you want to be here. See you then.